Happy Friday, everybody. Here we are at the bold, badass business show again. And today I am thrilled to have in the house the inimitable, the infamous, the guy everybody knows in networking, Robert Butwin. Welcome, Robert.
you know, welcome, and I'm really glad to be here and figuring out what we can share, the perspectives and insights that are going to help people take whatever they're doing to the next level.
I know, absolutely, Robert. That's what we are about in Bold Badass Business Owners. And I have to tell you all that Robert was inducted into the MLM Hall of Fame. He made millions in MLM companies, and there are reasons for that. He's going to share some of his secrets today. He's going to share the stuff that we don't need to be doing, the ways that we're in denial about what we really earn, and he's going to just share so much. He has been in MLM for how many years now, Robert?
I became full time in 1990, September 7th, 1990, because that was the day I was able to put my feet up on my boss's table, who happened to be my dad. And I'll get into that story in a couple minutes, and tell him I could no longer afford to work there anymore. But I actually
Mm.
started in 1984. And part of the story is when I first dove into MLM, because I had fairly deep pockets, I
Hmm.
ended up creating a lot of debt. And um, in the meantime, I had to pay back all the debt that I had created because I had great credit. But one of the things I've learned many things throughout my journey is that life doesn't happen to you; it happens for you. There's always
Yes,
a reason, yeah, a reason based on what's going on and how something good will come from that.
I'm putting that in the chat here. I love it. Life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And so the debt that you had racked up, tell us, you were working for your dad or you were working with your dad, and where was the debt coming from?
I was working with my dad. Our family started the high school award cheerleading jacket business in the 1930s, 1938 to be example. Oldest son through generation. My vision after I got off of the fallacy that I was going to be a professional athlete was to run the family business.
Mm,
Problem was too much family in the family business, and so I came to the realization that I needed to segue out of our family business, and so uh, back in 1983, I started figuring out what could I possibly do to get away from our family business because, part of the denial, and I take a look at the word denial, and let's first attack that word, or share with people where that word comes from. And I'm into acronyms, so denial is don't even notice I am lying. So it's coming to the realization
mm.
that you're lying to yourself. You haven't seen the signs. You're unconscious. Whatever that is, but you've got to make a change. And so I came to the realization because my dad had the full concept. It worked yesterday. It's going to work tomorrow. And as you and I know, as you take a look at all the changes that have happened in the marketplace, in fact, a cousin of mine wrote a song 60 years ago. And let me share the lyrics of one of his songs. You better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone. Times are changing, my friend. So you've got to
Mm.
embrace changes. And so when I was working for our family business, I realized I needed to figure out something that would allow me to create the kind of income, give me the
Mhm.
kind of freedom that would allow me to live life the way I wanted to live it.
Mm. I love that. And so, you realized you had to really find an opportunity that would allow you to keep growing and keep growing instead of being stuck in that family business. Now, let me make sure I got it right. I put denial up there. Don't even know I am lying. Is that right?
Notice.
Notice. Okay, because I was like, whoa, that's interesting. Okay. Don't even notice. Yeah, now we get the N. I was like, well, no is a homonym. So I love that, Robert. Don't even notice I am lying. And so I bet you went through a process, right? Of having kind of feeling a little lost, right?
Well, the process didn't quite happen yet. So
Mm-hmm.
let me get you up to it. You know, I was young and single, didn't know any better, and part of my vision, besides the fact of what I really wanted to create for myself in my life, which is a quality life. I was single, so I would go to different bars and nightclubs back in the early '83s before I got
Mm-hmm.
married. And
Mm-hmm.
so ultimately, I ended up running a nightclub where the owners had just, with no experience, had
Mm.
just sabotaged the nightclub. And I brought it back to the number one nightclub in the Twin Cities. It was called the Oz Nightclub. So, you know, I had the confidence from my experience in our family business. I had the confidence from, running the nightclub, and I was on the top of the world. And, and I'll tell you part of the other part of the story is shortly after I got done running the nightclub, and I would have bought it, but I didn't realize it was for sale. But that was probably one of my greatest breaks in my life because once the new owners came in, they started to try to tell me what to do, and I was the guy that built the nightclub, and I never, I don't like to take um, whatever from other people. So, and
Mm-hmm.
they had owned 3-2 bars, and there's a difference from a nightclub to the 3-2 bars. So I put an ad in the, what's called the Twin City Reader before there was online dating, because I was really interested in the, you know, running a nightclub. I had more than enough dates, and I knew lots of people, but I was curious to know who would need to put an ad or use the online dating to find their soulmate, so to speak. Well, you know, it just so happens 18 people responded. I went on the date with one person, and one of the people that responded, and this will get into what we were talking about, but she ultimately, um, normally, she's one of the best proofers I've ever seen. There was 4 type errors in the ad. She would have seen one of the 4. She would have never responded. Ultimately, in our first 45 minutes, she came to the realization that she was never going to see me again. Thank
Mm.
goodness the date lasted more than 45 minutes. And the turning point is I flashed her. For those of you that don't know what that is, no, it's not opening my coat, whatever. She had just taken a body language class, and ultimately, um, it's when you raise your eyebrows. And so she said, "Oh, this guy likes me. I better give him a second chance," because I was talking about things that she wasn't interested in, like my dreams and everything else where I was going. So anyhow, that led up to that defining moment, which, obviously, well, first of all, we've been married, happily married for 39 years and still happily married. But
Oh my goodness. So you met her in online dating, the early days?
the early days,
Wow. Now that's pretty amazing. So obviously you were a good copywriter. That was one of your skills as well.
not really. I outsourced it to a friend of mine.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, that's a good business owner right there. Outsource it out. Know that you're not good at it and outsource it, right?
That's part of my magic. Even today, it's like staying in your zone of genius. Even today, I
Mhm.
outsource almost everything else because my zone is genius is A, networking, and B,
Mhm.
having one-on-ones, which is where the magic happens. I mean, you and I met in a networking group. We had a one-on-one.
Mhm.
We came to the realization that, I probably might have some good insight and might be a good guest on your show. And, again, that's really where the magic happens, is having that one-on-one.
Mm. So let me ask you this, Robert. I agree with you too about the one-on-ones. That's where the magic happens because that's where we can go deeper, you know. That's where we can really connect and not just be present in a Zoom room or in a physical room together. That's where we can talk about the dogs and the cats and the interests that we have. As well as our business and what we're doing with it. So I totally agree with you there. So I want to ask you, what forms of denial do you see business owners being in about what they really earn? And I have my ideas about this that I'll share, but I want to hear what you have to say. What are the biggest forms of denial that you see business owners being in, such as what you've already mentioned, not staying in their zone of genius and thinking they have to do everything instead of outsourcing out? That's
No,
a form of denial,
yes,
being in denial about your real strengths.
that's one. I alluded to another one. If it worked yesterday, it's going to work tomorrow. If
Mm,
things don't change, the point is I mean, I take a look at my career as an entrepreneur. and all the changes that have happened. I mean, when I started, there was no Zoom, there was no internet, there was no Chat GPT, there was no this. I mean, all that kind of stuff. I mean, the constant in life is change. So
Hmm.
that's another key aspect of denial. The other aspect is they're carrying around too much baggage, either physically or psychologically. Um, it's like you if you want to really go fast, so to speak, you need to release the things that are not empowering you or holding you back. Your beliefs. You have to understand, and you take a look at the word belief. Right in the middle of the word belief is the word lie. So it's like
Mm.
which of your beliefs are holding you back, and which of your beliefs should you stay focused on? When I first met my wife, my belief was I was going to create this life. I didn't know how.
Hmm.
I just knew why I wanted it. I knew that if others could do it, meaning create the kind of freedom and flexibility, I could do it. But, part of it is understanding when you need to change your mindset. So, one of my other defining moments, and it was when I came across a cassette tape series. For those of the listeners that remember what a cassette tape is, it was by Wayne Dyer, and it was called No Limit Person. So how that
Mm.
relates to denial is, yeah, I went to college. I got a degree, but I didn't get an education. I got my education as an entrepreneur. So I had to come to the realization that whatever was happening in my life, no matter what it is, I was responsible for that being there. See, once you take responsibility for what is, and this is a part of denial, you can take responsibility for what will be. But again, you've got to get down to the reality of what's happening in your business. We all can have dreams, but quite often another form of denial is they're denying the fact that they aren't doing the right amount of activities.
Yes, daily, 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 daily. Did I say daily? Revenue generating activities. Some people call them IPAs, income producing activities. I also call them LGAs, Robert. I call them love giving activities because guess what our businesses are a form of love. It's a way to give love. It's a way to give our focus and our good energy to the planet. Yes, people who are not succeeding, all we have to do is look at their activity and track it, and we see why. It's really clear.
Exactly. So that's another form of denial. Another form of denial is the harder I work, the more successful I'm going to be. No, it's not about working hard. It's working smart. You know,
Hmm.
if if you show up and you've got all this, you're carrying this stress because people can see that you're efforting. You're too much efforting. It's the
Yeah.
ease. Now, another aspect of denial is people think it's going to be easy. Now, it's not necessarily easy to be an entrepreneur, but what I can tell you, it's worth it when you create the results that you want and deserve. So, part of my thing when I started to listen to the Wayne Dyer cassette tape series, I started to understand that I needed to change my mindset. And so I
Hmm.
started listening to a lot of cassette tape series. I spent money on going to seminars. I spent money on buying books, buying cassettes, all that kind of stuff. Things that would help me become better, help me sharpen my skill. And the fact is, another part of denial is think that you're that everything that is perfect. You've got to continually learn as it relates to making sure that you can create the kind of results that you're wanting. I'm learning every single day by listening to other people, by being active,
Yes.
involved.
You know what? I love that, Robert. And you and I were on the same train there because even though I was a youngin' in the 1990s and I was in graduate school, you know what? I had my membership to the audiobook club. And I was buying all sorts of books and listening to them, as well as reading all my stuff for my PhD. And I was also, I'll tell you, I found Nightingale Conant. Do you remember that? And I was able to get all these amazing things. And I was introduced to Tony Robbins and so many people, Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, Cheryl Richardson, all these people that I just really still, well, some of them have passed.
Yeah.
Louise Hay was like 94 or 95 when she passed. She
Right.
was amazing. Wayne Dyer, passed a few years ago. I got to see him in person, which was really neat. These folks, it's so important to fill our minds with good stuff. And I call my car Barnsley's University on Wheels because I'm always listening to something.
That was that was just a key thing that you said. When I was working for Butwin Sportswear and trying to figure out how to, figure out where I wanted to go, I turned my car into University on Wheels. A
Mm-hmm.
couple people that you didn't mention that I highly recommend: Michael Gerber, Jim Rohn.
Yes.
Jim Rohn, who's probably, to me, one of the best people, was one of the best people. And actually, I was on stage with Wayne Dyer, Jim Rohn, Michael Gerber,
Nice.
T. Harbecker because of my success in MLM. Not
I
because I
love
was a
that.
yeah,
I
great
did
speaker.
all that millionaire mind training, by the way, with T. I didn't do it with T. Harbecker, but with his people, and loved it. I did it twice. I went through the quantum stuff twice. Everybody who's listening, I want you to realize something. I really want you to hear this, okay? Robert made millions in MLMs, okay? How did Robert make millions? He worked on his mindset while he also did the daily activities that are required to have success. Mindset, activity. Mindset, activity. Did you hear that? Are you having an aha? This is the way. And I've always heard it said, like Zig Ziglar, oh gosh, amazing. I got to see him twice before he passed. And I just remember him talking about getting up at 4 a.m. and reading the Bible, but reading all this other stuff, good self-help, good business stuff, good, go for it. Augmentino and all these classic texts, and, filling his mind, priming his mind so that he could be in the best state possible for the entire day.
Exactly. That's exactly what I did. I mean, I realized that if I changed my mindset, did the activities exactly what you said, that and had the attitude of gratitude. That's really important. You've got
Mm,
to be grateful for where you are as you're going to where you deserve to be. When I finally
mm,
first, found my original mentor, Robert Nadiak, because again, quite often it's easier to create, in your mind to create the success than the reality. But, I had to have the attitude of gratitude. And I also had to realize that everything that happened was going to serve me. As I got through the tough times, as I was going to be a mentor of other people's, I could look them in the eye. I could speak from the heart and empathize with them and help them understand because I had to break through. It's sort of like in the analogy of that little chicken trying to get out of the egg. And the natural instinct is to try to help him, crack the egg to help make it easier for the chicken to get off, but you're actually making him weaker. So, I mean, I had to learn all that so that I could be more impactful and effective when I was working with other people. So I'd be able to better relate. So, yeah, mindset's extremely important. The daily activities, seeing the vision of where you know that you deserve to be, having the attitude of gratitude, and having faith. And ultimately, as it relates to the things you're doing, understand the purpose and what you're passionate about. And it's like we talked about all these other people that have unfortunately passed away. One of my mentors was a 70-year friend of my mom. I was alluding to it, Harvey McKay. On
mhm.
his 80th birthday, he invited 300 of his closest friends and associates. It probably cost him $1 million. Last year, he had his 90th birthday. Same thing. But it's having that goal, which is just a target of what you're shooting to accomplish. My goal, my objective is to live a life of meaning based on having a positive impact on as many people as I'm able to do.
I love that. That's such a vision. And, you know, we have to have the big vision and really understand our big vision. And then we get to chunk it down into steps because that vision's not going to help happen overnight. And I put in the chat here, this nugget you gave us, good gold nugget here. Be grateful for where you are while you go to where you deserve to be. I think that is so powerful. Now, I've heard you say, Robert, I've heard you say the word deserve several times already, the word deserve. And I think this points to something really important. Do you, those of you who are watching, do you believe you deserve success? Do you believe you deserve success? I want you to sit with that question. I believe that we all have little pieces of ourselves that don't feel good enough, myself included, and we got to take them on. We can't be in denial that we're there. We got to just take them on. Give them a name. You know, I have a name for mine, Robert. You want to hear it?
Sure.
Helga.
Oh, yeah.
And it's with two L's, Helga. And she's like this Nazi, you know, who probably worked in the concentration camps and really enjoyed it, that kind of person, because she will try to put me in hell. And Helga is that voice, and I know it. And when Helga comes up, I'm like, well, Helga, it's time for you to go on vacation. Here's a one-way ticket. You know, Helga, we all have our Helgas, or our Druseldas, or our Debbie Downers. We all have that little voice that can raise it up. But the thing is to be bigger than that Helga, to be bigger than that Druselda, to be bigger than that Death Eater, to use a Harry Potter reference.
You know, it's interesting that you brought that up. And let me explain why, because it's so true. But the sooner that you can recognize it, become consciously aware of it. And it happened to me back when I was listening to Michael Gerber's cassette tape series. He starts off by saying, you know, 4 to 5 of you entrepreneurs, business people are going to fail in the first 5 years. And he goes on and says, of the 20% that make it for the first 5 years, you're going to fail within the next 5 years. And I'm listening to my Helga, my self-talk. And I said, failure is not an option. See, I recognize the self-talk. And once you recognize it, you can, as you mentioned, either totally get rid of it or say, that's not who I am, you know, whatever the case is. But again, it's understanding when your self-talk is speaking to yourself.
And when we're believing it.
Yes.
When we believe Helga, and here's the thing, I realized too, Robert, it's kind of interesting. I realized, okay, I can make some friends with Helga. Like I can make friends with her because Helga is really good to have there when you're doing something like getting your stuff together for your tax preparer. She's helpful because she's like, get this, get that. You got to, she's like a taskmaster. So I can put her on an assignment like that. But Helga's not running the show in my business. Big, bold, badass Barnsley is. She's the one running the show. And so I would say to everybody listening, you know, whatever you perceive as your whatever you have as negative self-talk or whatever you perceive as an obstacle for you. Maybe you have anxiety. Maybe you have social anxiety. Maybe you have depression. Maybe you have dyslexia, whatever it is. Make friends with that. Make friends with that.
That's one example. And let me give you another one because this is what's worked for me.
Yeah.
I've got 4 people in my inner circle. One of them is my wife. And, you know, anytime it's like, you see me now with a beard and all of a sudden I'll get a little shaggy and she says, time to shave you up or whatever I'm doing. And she does it with love and kindness because she's got my best interest. And I've got 3 other people also that I've got a mastermind where anytime I've got something questionable. So again, I don't listen to my Helga, but I've replaced her. You know,
yes. You like, kicked her off the board of directors.
Exactly.
That's fabulous. That is fabulous. You know, one of my clients said today, I just love this. Shout out to Erin Edgar, the caring attorney. She is so amazing. Erin said, you know what? I just fired my imposter So she's talked about the imposter who feels like you don't know what you're doing. And she said, I just fired her. And I said, good. And I hope you didn't give her a severance package. And she's like, no, I just put her out in the cold. That's fabulous. Yeah, we want to fire that inner critic, fire them, get them off the board of directors. They don't deserve to be there if we're going to talk about the word deserve. And I love what you said too, Robert, because I run a mastermind, the Make It Happen mastermind. The whole point of that is that everybody has each other's back. And so when we have something happen, we have that we call them pittas, pain in the ass clients. When we have a pitta, that's our name for it, not pita. It's spelled like pita, but it's not bread. When we have a pitta, then we come to the group and share what's going on, and we brainstorm and we create solutions, and they work. Yes. But we have each other's back, and we promote each other as well. We're a sales force for each other. We're support for each other. When one had her mother pass away recently, just love her. I think you know her, Regina Carey. Love her. What a sweet person. Her mom passed away. So we were all there right with her while she's going through this. We just love each other, and we're there for each other, and we have each other's backs in business. So powerful. So how did you find those people that you have around you, Robert? I want to ask you that.
Well,
I know how you found your wife. Online dating. Oh yeah, yes. I know. You said that.
Everything else I've done through networking. Mm-hmm. There's a whole art as it relates to networking, as it relates to your business. I mean, we've all heard the saying that your net worth is in direct relationship to the value of your network. And, again, I can't expect anybody to do things I'm not doing. They don't necessarily have to be as compulsive as I am. For example, since March of 2020, I've probably had close to and probably over 2,000 one-on-ones. I mean, I take it seriously because I know what it takes to find the right people. It's like before I found my wife, so to speak, I dated a lot of people. I don't know how many people, I wasn't counting, but I had a lot of dates with a lot of different ladies before I met her. So, the first thing I did is I met them, most of them online, not all of them. And the other one that I didn't meet online, she was in a networking group here. She lives about 15 miles from me. But
that's
the
nice.
next part of it goes back to marketing 101. One of the key things in marketing, because again, besides being an elite network, I'm a marketer. I was instrumental, and there's stories behind it, of 65 million cassette tapes going into the marketplace in the early 90s. One of the key things about marketing is that it's that dirty 4-letter word, which is test. Something that I really avoided when I went through high school and college. I hated tests because I was programmed that I was only okay, even though my mom wanted me to do better, but I guess I resisted it because it was shoved down my throat. But the key the key in everything is you look at everything as a test. You test people. You understand their character. You can't demand loyalty. You can earn loyalty. So, but again, once I met them, wherever I meet them, I focused on finding out, do we have a similar values, objectives, and is it based on a win-win situation?
That's so great. I'm putting another gold nugget right up here in the chat. Look at everything. Y'all listen to what Robert said. Listen to the words of Robert, the wise words of Robert. But seriously, look at everything as a test. Test people, test products, test your marketing, test. And, I like that too. Because it gives us a little more latitude. It's kind of like experiment. It gives us some freedom. That we don't have to find that person we're looking for romantically, or that person we're looking for to hire in our business. We don't have to find them immediately. I really heard what you said, Robert, that you went out with a lot of women before you found the one, right?
Yep.
And I think this is a mistake we make in business. We hire people without properly testing them, or we let them into our inner circle without properly testing them. I know I'm guilty of that.
Again, I've made the same mistake. But again, one of the things I learned, I think it was from Dr. Robert Anthony of Beyond Positive Thinking. He said there's certain lessons we're supposed to learn. And until we learn that lesson, life will continually trip you up in that lesson. So
Oh, yes.
yeah, and I like the word fail because to me there is no fail, and the acronym for fail is for all I've learned. So
Ooh,
anytime you do something, you take a look at what was my learning experience, and I like the definite definition of how I look at experience. Experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. The point is, do you use that as something that validates your lack, or do you use it as a stepping stone to ensure that you're going to accomplish or you know end up where you want to end up in what you're doing?
wow. This is awesome. I love this. So I've written up here, fail equals for all I've learned. I love that. I don't believe in failure either, Robert. I call failure just redirection, you know? It's like a GPS. You know, the GPS doesn't say, "You stupid fuck, why didn't you turn right?" It says, "Take the next right and do a U." It's non-judgmental, but so often we are judgmental of ourselves when we perceive that we failed. I see failure as redirection. It's just we were going in a direction that didn't quite work, and we get to recalibrate, as the GPS says, recalibrating before she tells you to turn right. Then you said experience is what you get when you don't get what you want, and what is important is how you use that experience. I love this, Robert. This is amazing. So just because we like to really pull back the red curtain, so to speak, and bold badass business owners and look at some of our, just be real about business and real about some of the stuff we've done that hasn't worked,
Mhm.
what would you say are some really big moments where you realized, oh God, I was lying to myself and I have to snap out of this in your MLM businesses?
Man, in MLM, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. As you mentioned, I'm in the Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
um, and there's a couple of different ones. I mean, one of my biggest things is, if I would take off my shirt right now, you'd see a lot of arrows sticking out of my back. But to save everybody that happening, just take my word of that.
That's hilarious.
But so some of the experiences, it's like obviously you can always do you can if you really know what you're doing in MLM, you can do it without the right upline. But I've learned that the right upline and the right relationship with the owner.
Mhm.
Now, obviously, a beginner usually is not going to have that right relationship with the owner in the beginning stages, but I've earned that ability. So, um, those are those are some of the key things that I've learned. Um, the other thing, and there's so much I've learned. I mean, many people think in MLM it's about finding other people to work for you. That's
Mhm.
that's totally a myth because in reality, you're working for the person that you bring involved. Because really, you're selling them that you can help them become more successful, and for you to do that, it's about you. Number one, going to work for them because once that you get them to the point where they're making $300 to $500 a month, they're going to stick. 80 to 85% of bankruptcies would have been avoided for an extra $300 to $500 a month. So the other
Mm.
thing I've learned, the biggest thing that we're actually dealing with is the other person's perception.
Mhm.
Their perception is their reality. Many people, as they look at an MLM, they look at the fact that it's about trying to sell products. That's not what it's about. What we really do is two aspects. Number one, we educate. Obviously, you want to have a product line that people are going to want to be able to want to use if they're making money or not.
Mhm.
So you educate and then you influence them. Because I believe truly from the bottom of my heart, if people really understood this business, everybody would be involved in the business. And I can go into reasons. Quite often in most of the companies I've worked with over the years are holistic nutrition products.
Mhm.
Now you can find the similar, not necessarily exact products in a Costco or Whole Foods, and it might be 20 or 30% less. But if I go buy it there, number one, I can't write it off. But if I buy it
Mhm.
from my own MLM company, I can write
Mhm.
off that product plus take advantage of a lot of the tax benefits that happen.
Exactly.
As
Robert, you're dead on here. It's the very reason why I think I shared with you that I joined LifeWave, the stem
yep,
cell patches, because it's just smart. I'm not going to become a retail customer with them. I'm going to become I came in as a distributor and immediately started sharing it with some of my clients who were having health issues like diabetes, like depression and anxiety and other things. And it started working for them, restless leg syndromes, all sorts of stuff. So, you know, what you just said is genius. I really want everyone to hear this. Now, a lot of people, MLMs can get a bad rap. People are like, oh, that's multi-level marketing. Oh, network marketing. Ooh. But you all, it is really one of the easiest ways to start a business because everything's done for you. There's everything. All you do is you pay your little amount. And I was talking about this on a podcast I was on the other day, Robert. I'm going to have to connect you and Jenny so you can go on because she does badass sales for MLMs. I want
cool.
you to be on her show. But she and I were talking about the fact that, as it says in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, no matter what you work, what job you work, you need to have a side business. And you can come into an MLM sometimes for as little as like $29 or $39.
Yep.
And I've never seen anything higher than like a few hundred. So everything's done for you. And if you have a good upline, I'm glad you mentioned that. If you have a great sponsor, if you develop that relationship and that sponsor really nurtures you, you're going to get where you want to go. But if you have a shitty upline, well, what about that, Robert? What do you do? I've had that experience,
Well,
FYI.
yeah, and I've had that experience too. First of all, before I go into that, you know the acronym, and you know I'm into acronyms, right?
I now know it. I didn't know it before. And now I'm gonna send you acronyms. I'm gonna text you acronyms just so you know, because I like acronyms too. I taught a networking seminar yesterday and I used Dr. Barnsley's GAB formula. And GAB is an acronym for the three important parts of networking: genuine interest, asking intelligent questions, and being fully present. And we talked about that. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so let me give you some acronyms for MLM. The first one is multi-level marketing, which is the one that most people look at it as. The second one is making lots of money.
Mm-hmm.
The third one is making life meaningful. And the fourth one is making love more. Which would you like?
Making love more.
Because you got the free time if you're good.
Next time I'm going to interview your wife. I'm going to be like, tell me, what does MLM mean to you? And see what she says. I absolutely love that. That's great, Robert. And yeah, making life meaningful, because here's the other thing about MLMs. If you want a community, you're going to find that with an MLM. If you've got a good upline, you're going to find a good community, and that makes life meaningful.
Let me, and I know you asked me a question that sort of sidestepped it, but one of the key aspects as it relates to everything that we do and what's really allowed me to make millions of dollars is one word, understanding one word. And that
Lay it on us. Lay it on us, Robert. Wait,
leverage.
drum roll.
It's leverage.
Yes.
The whole business model of MLM is based on helping others succeed. You've got a geometric progression, basically. Every MLM is based on a geometric progression. Mm-hmm. So the way you're going to be successful is attract the right people that, ultimately are lucky because they met you. And the acronym for lucky, and goes back to Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. So the last letter in lucky is what you. So it's you doing the proper things. But what are the proper things in lucky? Laboring under correct knowledge. So, if you have the wrong upline, which is a question that you asked, you got a couple choices, because there's multiple different MLM companies, and many of them, if you wait out for whatever 6 months, and I'm not telling anybody what to do in any particular company, so you can either go find, it's like before I met my wife, I dated a lot of different ladies. If you don't have the right upline, if all the elements aren't there, you can find another company, or you can just go to work. You can do it by yourself. It might be a little bit harder, but again, that's part of your story.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, that's basically what I did with Legal Shield, you know. I love Legal Shield and I still offer it to my business coaching clients. It's really a great membership. And I was working under someone and she actually passed away. I'm still in touch with her husband, but you know, I just work it myself because I love my membership.
well, let me give you
Yeah.
another example. Do you know who Dexter Yeager was?
Dexter who?
Dexter Yeager.
No, I don't. Tell
He
us.
was like, he was Mr. Amway,
Okay.
and ultimately his upline dropped out.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, they came across one another, and so the guy that dropped out, he says, Dexter, I've heard you've done pretty well in Amway. He said, if I would have stayed in, how much money would I have made? And
Mm-hmm.
Dexter's response was, you don't even want to know. Same thing with Mark Yarnell, who's passed away when, he was originally one of the top people in New Skin. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, sometimes the people drop out and it rolls up. It depends upon which program. But again, if it is to be, it's up to you. We all need to take responsibility for creating the success, no matter what kind of business that you're in, so that you can create the results that you deserve. Because, you know, did you ever watch the movie A Knight's Tale?
I did. It's been a while, but yes, I did.
Yeah. Well, one of the key lines in it, because it was a guy that wanted to be a knight back when he had to be born into nobility,
Right.
but his dad told him a key line. He said, "Son, you can change your stars." The point is,
Mm.
it doesn't matter where you start in life or where you are now. The key is the direction you're headed. Now you can choose that direction anytime, but the more important part is where you choose to end up. Life is about the choices we make. Are you going to live an okay life or are you going to live
Mhm.
an exceptional life? The choice is yours.
That's very true. And how are you going to respond to those potholes in life? You know, because that's a choice as well. You know, we can choose stress or we can choose to be in flow.
Or you can choose to be a victim or you can choose to
Mhm.
be a victor.
Exactly. And you know what? I'm so happy to hear you say that, Robert, because I talk all the time about that distinction that really there are just, I stood up at my church on Sunday and I said, really, they're just, I'm not a black and white thinker, but in this case, it's black and white. You got two major positions in life. One is victim, where you think that life is happening to you and everything's external and you have no control, or you're a victor and you know that you are response able. You're able to respond to anything responsibly and powerfully, and you stand in your power. And that's the victor. And which one will you choose? And we've heard these stories of like two twins, and they were both born to an alcoholic father, grew up with alcoholism in the family. Then one of them's in the gutter, and then one of them is like the super successful multimillionaire. And they asked both of them, "Hey, the guy in the gutter, why are you in the gutter?" And he's like, "Because my dad was an alcoholic." And they were like, okay. And then they asked the multimillionaire, why are you in the gutter? And he says, because my dad was an alcoholic.
Yep, exactly. It's how you perceive things and the actions you take.
Exactly. And do we see it as, you know, both those people choosing what they chose out of the same thing? I like to say that Robert, that what happens to us is really neutral. It's really neutral. When we lose somebody, and I'm very sorry to hear about the loss in your family, when we lose someone, the actual event is neutral. The universe isn't saying, let's punish Barnsley, let's punish Robert. You know, universe isn't trying to get us, right? It's a neutral event. We're the ones who make up the story around it, and we can decide on a story that forwards us, that allows us to be at peace and to move forward, or we can decide on a story that keeps us stuck and mired in crapiola. That's my favorite thing to say, like a crapiola.
Yep,
You know,
exactly.
what story do you choose, you all? I want everybody who's watching, and I know y'all are there. Don't be an internet voyeur. Stop. We can see you. We can. I want you to put a story you've told yourself that you know is not true, and then a new story that you're going to tell yourself instead of that old Helga story. And if you didn't hear about Helga, go back to earlier. that voice that we have that criticizes. What is the story you told yourself, and what is the new story you're going to tell yourself? So, Robert, we've covered a lot about forms of denial. There's one more thing I really definitely want us to cover before we wrap up, and that is, how much time and energy it requires to get to where you got, being part of the Millionaire Hall of Fame, for instance. Because I think a lot of times people read things like the 4 Hour Work Week, and I love the book, but read stuff and make assumptions that being an entrepreneur is super easy and that they'll have all this time freedom, etc. And really, I want to just shake you all out of denial about that. Now, when you leverage, you'll definitely be using your time smartly, but there's a lot of sweat equity that you're going to have in whatever kind of business you have. So, Robert, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as I tell you about it, the point is, we talked about A Knight's Tale. The point is, you can create the movie of your life, however it
Hmm.
is. It can go in flow. It can go with struggles one way or the other. A lot of it goes back to your ability to have a positive impact. I believe it's easier today than ever before. I've said that from stage many times. I'll say it today. And the reason why, in one aspect, for the most part, it's easier, and there's one aspect where it's a little bit harder. But if the point is, we talked about the money I spent on personal growth.
Hmm.
Today, you can virtually get all that personal growth if you know where to find it for nothing. So, it's like I can guide people to information. I can create videos. People can watch this video over and over again because between the two of us, we created a lot of key um, insights and perspectives that will help other people. So
Yes.
you can plug into that kind of information today. So that's where it's easier. Sometimes it's a little more difficult, just a little, is because with all these social media platforms selling our information, you know, I get numb to emails. Even if somebody's really a good friend of mine, I'm much more likely to look at a text than an email.
Hmm.
It's like that's one example. Do you even answer a phone if it's a number that's not in your contact? I know
I
I
don't.
don't. Yeah,
I don't.
exactly.
I turn my ringer off, Robert, so I can get stuff done.
Yeah,
Seriously, I'm so covetous of my time and time blocking.
yeah. So the key is breaking through the noise, making real connections, and then empowering the other people. Joe Polish talks about an elf business. I like to look at it as an elm business,
Hmm.
because the elm tree's got roots and it grows tall. An elf is easy, lucrative, and fun. To me, it's easy, lucrative, and meaningful. And to me, if you focus helping other people, it's not about you, it's about them. So if
Hmm.
you focus on helping other people figure out what they need to do, what they can do, they can release whatever they're holding on to, because if wherever you're trying to travel to, if you have too much baggage, it's like because of the fact that I've traveled so much. I'll give you a little tidbit. Because I've traveled so much, I'm in the 2 million mile club at United Airlines. When I
Hmm.
trip, I can have 3 suitcases of 70 pounds each. Most
Oh
people
Lord.
can't do that. Yeah. Now I don't do that most of the time. I've done it once or twice. But the point is, you've got to be able to release your baggage. You can't carry too much um, physical or emotional baggage if you really want to create success. You've got to discipline yourself. Going back to the book Atomic Habits, get in the
Hmm.
habits of consistently moving in the direction to become the person that you desire to be. And so that's really what it takes. And then focusing on helping other people. Um,
And stay
back
consistent.
consistent. Yeah, going back to the airlines, they always tell you if we're going to lose altitude, put your mask on first. But you've
Hmm.
always got to help other people, knowing that your success is based on helping other people succeed.
And maybe you're just going to innovate so nobody needs an air mask. How
Yeah.
about you just innovate and create something so there is no need for an air mask, period. So there's so many. That's what I love about entrepreneurship is really, you all, the only limits are the ones we put on ourselves. That is why it's so exciting. And that is why sometimes it can be overwhelming to some people too, is because there's so much that you could focus on, and it really is important to have laser focus. So I would say those of you who are considering, say, an MLM for your starter business, give it your undivided attention to start. What do you say, Robert?
Definitely, and look at everything as a learning experience. Knowing if others can do it, so can you. Um, Obviously, you want to, you want to find the right company, the right sponsorship. It's like if you're going to open a McDonald's, you want to open it in a busy area. You want it somewhere in an isolated area, a right foot
Yeah.
traffic. But today, with networking events on Zoom, with other ways to find people, getting on podcasts, getting, speaking in front of groups, learn to be able to communicate. I mean, let me tell you a story. The first time that I went to an ML meeting, I flew down to Houston. I was living in Minnesota, and I was the only person in that area that had the money to, to take the trip. So when I got back, I was supposed to speak in front of a group of people. And so within the first 30 seconds, my knees buckled, my eyes rolled back in my head, and somebody had to do it, take me off. My wife suggested I go, twisted my arm very lovingly that I needed to go to Toastmasters. And I've had to learn how to speak effectively in front of other people. So
Mm.
you want to continually improve your skills. It doesn't mean that you have to speak on stages, but part of it, part of my mindset was I would figure out how to become more of an impactful speaker. Um, Not that it's a necessary, but I wanted to have, I wanted to be able to connect with people with more than one at a time. Let's put it that way.
I think that's excellent advice for everyone, because no matter what you do, communication is going to be a necessary skill. And Toastmasters is a great organization to join to hone your speaking ability. And also National Speakers Association. Here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize: to get in, you have to do a certain number of paid speeches for sure, but you can also attend the chapter events without being a member. So start attending the chapter events for NSA, National Speakers Association, and you'll learn so much. I did a lot of that in the early years of my speaking business, and it was really great, Robert. I learned so much, because see, here's the thing: there's a business of speaking, you all. There's speaking and there's a business of speaking, and then there's speaking that brings business. All right? So you got several different ways that you can use speaking. And I do think it's your best form of leverage, actually, Robert, is speaking to groups, speaking in front of groups. And that may be speaking online, it may be Facebook Lives, it may be podcast guesting, or having your own show like the Bold Badass Business Owners. It may be speaking at summits. There are so many ways you can do it. So, those of you listening, speaking is really going to always be a necessity in your business, whether you choose an MLM or you decide to start from the ground up. So, Robert, if you had, I'm going to ask you this question. This will be fun as we wrap. If you had one thing you could do over, one thing you could do over in your career, let's say, in your entrepreneurship, what would it be?
Oh,
Isn't that a good question? It's
no,
juicy.
it's a great question. And again, based on the fact that I've got a lot of arrows sticking out of my back, I would make sure I didn't have as many, and I would be have more clarity and specificity when I'm coming to agreements with other people, no matter what those agreements.
Mm,
Because again, you obviously I didn't learn from my mistakes. I mean, I put my hand on that hot stove more than once, and my
yep.
wife, I would quite often look at us and say, we're at that age that we should be learning from our lessons. So I would learn from the lessons rather than repeat them as many times as I have.
So I'm gathering that maybe there were some agreements that weren't really hashed out extensively, or
Oh yeah.
signed or made into contracts, et cetera. And that caused, where did the arrows come from, Robert? Don't tell us names, obviously, but they were from, where did they come from? Those arrows, not errors,
Oh,
arrows sticking out of your
organization
back.
one of the guys I was coaching, and I helped him make millions of dollars. He didn't pay his taxes, and so he came to me to borrow some money. Today, he still owes me 15 years later $50,000. That's one
Oh
example.
man,
Yeah, and
lesson learned.
I got another one. You know, my wife and her husband, not my wife, I'm sorry, my daughter and her husband got divorced. We put up close to $200,000 for them to buy a house, and they both took it. Well, my daughter, that would just be off of inheritance. Her husband declared bankruptcy, so I mean, you got multiple of those kind of things that you learn. So
Yes, we got to set good boundaries with our agreements, especially with people close to us. I have had those arrows too, Robert, people that I helped get out of thousands of dollars of debt, and then they didn't pay me for the coaching. Can you imagine? They didn't pay the full amount. And it ruined. There are two people that it really, really ruined the relationship, where these were people I admired.
yep,
So I just have to say to everybody, make your agreements clear, especially with family or friends, people close to you. Make them really clear and stick to them, sign them, stick to them, and have your integrity, because anytime that we let somebody, and the other thing is take people to task, Robert, we got to take people to task when they do crap, because I just evicted a tenant it was all over the lease. You can't smoke, blah, blah, blah. Guess who was smoking? Had to evict her. It was not a pleasant thing to do, but it had to be done. And if we let people get by with not sticking to agreements, we've actually deprived them of their integrity.
yep. So wrapping up in that whole thought, here's what I've learned: a person's character is like a tea bag.
It's like a tea bag.
Yes, you never know what's inside of it until it gets into hot water.
Oh,
Unfortunately,
wow.
unfortunately, because most people are very caring human beings, they miss the signs of, when people are out of character.
Mhm.
So, with that, let me ask you a simple question: what color are yield signs?
What color or what?
Yield signs.
What signs?
Yield signs. Yield.
Oh,
When you
yield. Yeah, I thought you said kneeled. I was like, kneeled. I was thinking about the night. Yield signs. They're yellow,
they
right?
have been yellow for over 40 years, and how many of them have you driven by?
They're red.
Yes, red and white.
Yeah, they're red. I just realized that after I said yellow.
But the reason why is you're thinking of a stop light.
Hmm.
You see a stoplight, the yellow's there. So, but again, people are human and they'll miss the signs. And that's why you want to shift your consciousness and raise your consciousness.
I love this. I put this nugget up here. This is fabulous. A person's character is like a tea bag. You'll never know. I said you've, but just say y'all. I don't talk and type it well at the same time. You'll never know who they are until they're in hot water. Mm. And maybe they've pulled you into the hot water and you're like, I ain't staying in here. Let me out. That's fantastic. Yes. And we passed by those signs. As soon as I said yellow, I was like, no, a yield sign is red. I was just in traffic right before this and I went through a yield sign and still I said yellow first. You all, we have to watch for the signs. And that's another form. Guess what? We're in denial when we make excuses for people who are working for us or working with us or borrowing something from us, who are being pittas, right? We make excuses for them, and that's a form of denial, isn't it, Robert?
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. So we got to be willing to have the hard conversations. The hard conversations are not fun, but we have to be willing to have them. I just had to fire a house cleaner, and I really loved her. And she's a single mom, which I am too. And I was wanting for it to work. And I made lists, checklists, Robert. I did all sorts of stuff. And every time I was having to clean up afterwards,
Yeah.
right?
She,
Doesn't
she, didn't
work.
live up, she didn't live up to your standards, and she wouldn't raise her quality to hit your standards.
And her values are great. I love her values, but the way that I needed things cleaned was not happening. And this has got to be the same when we have an assistant, when we have a tax preparer. I fired 3 of them before I found the guy I've had for a long time because I knew more than they did. And it's hard, you all. It is hard as business owners to make these decisions, isn't it? Especially when we're compassionate and empathetic, we're people, but we have to get out of denial and just realize that unless we do, we're just going to get into hot water.
Yeah. One last thing to say is because you just spurred another thing. The altitude of your company is in direct relationship to your lowest paid employee.
Whoa. Oh, that's a nugget. The altitude, say it again.
The altitude of your company as an entrepreneur is in direct
Altitude or attitude? Altitude, right?
altitude of your company is in direct relationship with the attitude of your lowest paid employee.
Let's see, to the attitude. There we go. That is genius right there. And of course, when you apply that to MLMs, what does that mean? You need the whole team. Teams are important. So much more gets achieved when we have a team than when we're working trying to do it all ourselves.
Yeah. The key in MLM is you want to create interdependent, not codependent relationships. You've got it. You can guide people. You want to create some kind of a systematic process to help people attract and empower, because that's really what we do is we attract the right people, plug them into some kind of a system that will allow them to create a greater level of success.
Fabulous. I love that. Systems are always a way to leverage, you all. Always. We need systems for everything. I have systems for everything in my house. What goes on in the house? I have systems for, you know, my business. We got to have them have systems for everything that we do. Otherwise, everything will pile up and it won't get done, right? Yeah. So, Robert, you have given us so much. I would like to ask you, is there a freebie you'd like to give people? I will definitely give all of you, when you go to spirited-solutions.com, you can grab my ebook, How to Overcome Overwhelm in 7 Easy Steps. It's a fun read and it'll give you lots of strategies you can apply immediately. Robert, do you have something you want to give everyone
Of
by
course,
chance?
I'm happy to give it to them. The best thing to do is go to my calendar, book a time, and I'll give you a gift that's worth far over $500.
Nice. Okay, so give me your calendar link so I can put it here in the comments.
Calendly.com/Butwin, Butwin. Just remember, when you connect with Robert, my name's Robert Butwin. When you connect with Robert, you do nothing but win.
Mm.
So connect to my calendar. Just put your name, the name of your show, so I know that because it's not something that I give out to everybody, so that I
Mhm.
know that you deserve it. So reference this show.
All right, you all. Yes, because we know that at this show, it's the people who stay and listen, really listen, or go back and listen to the whole thing later, who get to the end and get the giveaways that are amazing. And as Robert said, Calendly, which is calendly.com/Butwin, Butwin. Set up a time and you'll get a gift worth over 500. And remember, as his name says, when you meet with Robert,
You do nothing but
win. You do nothing but win. Got it. Robert, you have been an amazing guest. I really appreciate you coming on here, giving us so many nuggets. I've got so much in the chat over here. Everybody, go to Robert's Calendly, grab your time with him. You will be happy you did. Go grab your freebie, spirited-solutions.com, your complimentary ebook, and help me out here. Spread the word. Share this. Be a hero. Share this with someone you know who is in an MLM or thinking about an MLM, or someone who's growing their entrepreneurial venture, whatever it is. All right. Go and subscribe at YouTube to the Bold Badass Business Show, which you will find at Dr. Barnsley NC on YouTube. Dr. Barnsley NC. You can just put in Dr. Barnsley Brown and it'll pop right up. Subscribe, you all, and share the wealth with others. And remember, you are already a bold, badass business owner, or you would not be here today. Thanks again, Robert.
You're welcome.